I just think I could spread the floor. I just think I could be a threat. The three-point line, I can rebound, I can pass the ball. Just spread the floor for the guards. Fast-paced, free playing, shoot the ball, play defense, fast break.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball. Today's show also brought to you by hotels.com and by Grip 6 Belts. Yesterday I did a mock draft with a whole bunch of listeners to this podcast, Patreon supporters as well. They took the reins of different teams and different and GMs for those teams to make those picks. Today this is something that I do every year. Sometimes I do it as a podcast, sometimes I do it as an article. I'm doing it as a podcast today where I take the control of every team. I'm the GM for every team. I'm not doing a mock draft based on rumors or where I think players are going to go. It's more based on what I would do if I was in that situation. But this draft feels a lot harder than a lot of these previous drafts. There's just so much uncertainty and so many negatives with so many of these players that it does become hard. And I've done this mock draft here already, obviously, before I put it to air. And I'm already second guessing plenty of the picks that I made. And if I went back and did this in a day's time or 2 days' time, I'd probably have some different selections. It is quite like that with that really top-end talent with Zion Williamson, and then a bunch of 5 guys, 10 guys, 20 guys, I don't know, where they can all be sort of interchangeable, all with really significant flaws. And we've talked about this before. Guards who can't pass, players who can't shoot, just weird combinations of players, undersized centers, like really weird stuff. And maybe the NBA trends towards these sort of guys, but a very strange mix of players. Not the greatest in terms of fantasy value or dynasty value with these players coming into the league as well. Michael Bolton, though, he wants to see me go through all of the draft. We're doing 2 rounds in today's draft as well. So
let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. Let's start off with the number 1 pick. No surprise there. Zion Williamson going to the New Orleans Pelicans. Zion's a guy that I think we should almost be penciling in for a top 50 fantasy season next year, top 40 perhaps. Field goal percentage was through the roof last year. He does have to work on his shooting, like so many of these players, but the ability to generate steals and blocks, get rebounds, that was all massive in college. He'll score a lot, assuming Anthony Davis isn't on this team at the beginning of the season. He feels like an absolute lock to be the number 1 fantasy rookie next season, the number 1 pick in every single dynasty draft, and a guy that we're looking at as a top 10 upside player in the future. Set records in terms of advanced stats this season, 20 box score plus minus, the biggest ever seen, 14.07 PIPM, massive offensively, massive defensively, true shooting of over 70%, average 22.5 and 9 with 1.8 blocks and 2.1 steals. You don't need me to tell you too much about Zion. Going to be a fantasy contributor in multiple areas, and if we get that free throw percentage up to 70 plus, then the top 2, top 1 sort of is absolutely in play with an ability to contribute right across the board. At number 2, even from here, I'm not certain on this pick. I don't know that I'd necessarily go this route. I don't know that Ja is going to be the second best player in this draft. That's Ja Morant, of course, going to the Memphis Grizzlies here at pick number 2. But I don't really know which other player to go for. I worry that Morant struggled a little bit in his freshman season. The shooting is a concern. He gave absolutely no shits at all on defense, but then there's reports that he wasn't trying on defense based on the large load that he had offensively, and that he in some of those skills camps he was really locked in defensively. So there is worries there. I like his fantasy upside for next season. It might be Trae Young level. He's not as good of a player as Trae Young. He's not as good of a shooter as Trae Young, but one of the few guys at the top end of the draft that can hit free throws. He can generate some steals, but it's his scoring and his assists on a team like Memphis that will really use that usage. Ja's going to fit in well there. He's also going to be a strong fantasy guy. And I'm pretty sure that Zion and Ja are going to be my number 1 and number 2 dynasty players for rookies moving forward. No one is surprised with these 2 selections. Morant put up strong numbers last season as well with that, as I said, crazy usage, plus 7.62 PIPM average, 24.5 with 10 assists. Also 0.8 blocks, which is a really interesting number for a point guard. We know these guards that can get blocks can be really useful, and he did block shots at a decent enough level last season. At number 3, it didn't get weird because this is sort of the projection for this pick, but I'm not convinced of it in the slightest. RJ Barrett out of Duke going to the New York Knicks. I think the likelihood of Kevin Durant going to New York seems lower at this point given the injury. That probably helps Barrett a little bit. I wasn't sure how he was going to be able to fit in any sort of off-ball role. We saw him struggle to adapt playing alongside Zion Williamson. Poor decision-making, poor vision, ill-advised shots. He does have some playmaking ability to pass. He has that. He averaged 4.3 assists with 22.5 points. The defensive stuff is a little bit of a worry for Barrett in terms of the ability to generate defensive numbers, and his defensive metrics weren't all that high as well, and not a guy that translated particularly well from a fantasy point of view as well. But as we always talk about, getting scoring can be a difficult thing to do in fantasy, so that the upside he has there, but poor shooting, poor free throw shooting, poor three-point shooting, low steal rate, an okay rebounder, but not a super strong one, which I don't think will be as good in the NBA as well. So he is my third overall pick here. But not convinced with it at all. Could go in those other directions. Jarrett Colvin was another option that I considered there at pick number 3. Let's go on to the next group of picks here. At number 4, the Lakers taking Darius Garland. I fully expect this trade to not be part of the Lakers' core as we move forward. I think it's going to be picked by someone else on draft day. It could even be by the time you're listening to this that the Pelicans have this pick. But if the Lakers do hold this selection, Darius Garland, a guy that we didn't see a huge amount of at Vanderbilt, only think 5 games with a knee injury, but showed an ability to create his own shot, but more importantly to knock down that shot, to take deep threes. Defensively, there are real issues, but that could help playing alongside someone like Lonzo Ball, that we know has a tremendous amount of defensive ability. The steal and block rates are a concern for Garland in that minimal time that he did play. That is something for us to pay some attention to. Just 0.8 steals, and the really low assist numbers, 2.6 assists, is not a good number. But he would be, again, playing at the Lakers alongside LeBron James and Lonzo Ball. With the way the roster is currently structured, he wouldn't have to be doing much in that area. Defense is a massive concern for him, but he is the one that I'm going with there. Just the guy that can shoot alongside LeBron James is probably the way we need to go. At number 5, the Cavaliers go with Jarrett Colvin out of Texas Tech. As I mentioned, he could very easily be the second best player in this class. He could be the 12th best player in this class. I'm taking him here at number 5 to the Cavs. He's more of a 2-3, but a guy that can be a ball handler, a primary initiator. They've got Colin Sexton, the Padawan, who was their starting point guard, one of the worst passing point guards in the NBA. Did improve as the season went on in terms of his scoring and his shot selection. Still can't pass. So having a guy like Culver, who's not as high a usage of a guy, but someone who can provide some defensive ability and provide that creation ability, I think is going to work pretty well here for Cleveland. Not a great fantasy translation guy either, Jarrett Culver. At least the steal rate's okay. The shooting is a concern, a weird shooting motion that he seems to have changed his shot quite a bit. The assists are really interesting on the wing there, and I could very easily see a scenario where in a dynasty format you take Culver over RJ Barrett. At number 6, the Suns go with Deandre Hunter out of Virginia. I was tossing up here, do the Suns want a point guard? But if I have to stick with what I believe in, and I believe that Devin Booker is the point guard for Phoenix and should be the point guard moving forward. So you go with a guy like Hunter who can play at the 4, maybe play a little bit at the 3, take some of that role if TJ Warren ends up getting moved. Then you've got McCall Bridges there at the 3, Tyler Johnson and Booker playing together for a bit, and they're apparently looking in free agency too. So I'm going with DeAndre Hunter, who shot the ball really well in college. Doesn't mean I think he's going to be a great offensive player in the NBA. And one of those players who's a strong defender but doesn't generate any defensive stats, which is obviously horrible for fantasy, and not a guy that I'd want to be picking very high in dynasty drafts. But that ability to be a good shooter hopefully can translate. He didn't really show much in terms of being a guy who could take those NBA caliber threes, but I do like him as this selection here for the Phoenix Suns, averaging 15-5 last season for the Virginia Cavaliers with a true shooting of 62% box score plus minus. of almost 11 and really strong defensive stuff from Deandre Hunter. Make sure you never miss an episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, and do that by downloading the Himalaya podcast app. It's free, it's easy to use. Every single podcast you're looking for is there. Go over there, follow Locked On Fantasy Basketball. You can follow your individual shows, get it up there to be the number one of the Locked On podcast over on Himalaya. So just download that app, search up Locked On Fantasy Basketball, and follow my show over there. You can give comments, thumbs up on individual episodes as well. It's a great new app to download your podcast and listen to them. All right, let's go on to the next group of guys here in this mock draft. At pick number 7, my former team, the Chicago Bulls. I'm going with Coby White there. You're well aware, if you listened to this program in the past, that I don't think that Chris Dunn is an NBA starting caliber player. So let's go and try and upgrade that position. There's Levine, there's Porter, there's Markkanen, there's Wendell Carter at the 2 through 5. And I don't really like drafting just for need. But when probably one of the best players available, maybe he's not the best player available, I could have gone with another guy in this spot. But when there's such closeness between these guys, grabbing someone who might be able to fill a role is important. The ability to hit a 3, him and Levine as a combo, I'm not sold on it. I worry about the shot selections of both of these guys. Defensively, it could be a concern as well. White was pretty strong for North Carolina, but still had his issues pretty clearly throughout the season in terms of generating assists, just 4 assists per game, 1.1 steals is nice, 16 points. Shot the ball okay as well, but not great. But that 3-point shooting is something that really can open it up for him. So I went with him at number 7, Coby White. At number 8, the Hawks. Geez, I debated this one quite a bit. I ended up going with Cam Reddish, and it's probably the pick that I hate the most when going back to review this draft. Now, Reddish was not good in the slightest. And I just saw, about 10 minutes or 20 minutes before going in to record this podcast, I saw someone had written Stefan Noe from The Athletic talking about highly regarded high school prospects, and then when they slide out of the top 5 in the draft, and he had a list of top 3 high school recruits that fell outside of the top 5 of the draft, and it's a list that's going to make you feel pretty sick. Michael Porter, Josh Jackson, Harry Giles, Skal Labissiere, Emmanuel Mudiay, Stan Johnson, Julius Randle, Nerlens Noel, Shabazz Muhammad, Isaiah Austin, Kyle Anderson, Austin Rivers, the pencil, Harrison Barnes, and Jared Sullinger. Not any of those players are really any good. Julius Randle, you could say probably, I don't know if he's lived up to expectation. Well, he hasn't lived up to expectation of being the second best player in that high school class. He went at pick number 7. I guess Michael Porter, the jury's still out, but that back injury, look, pretty much these guys who come in highly touted out of high school and struggle in college, they struggle in the NBA, and that's a real concern with Reddish. His numbers were pretty piss poor, 13.5 points only. The 1.6 steals is really nice. He apparently is a 3-point shooter, but couldn't actually shoot threes at a high rate, which is a concern. A paltry 3.62 PIPM. His defensive ability was okay. Handling the ball, a real concern, but I think with the trading of the artist formerly known as Taurean Prince, Atlanta's got an opening there on the wing. I think, and I don't want to be sucked in too much by upside, but I think I have to go, well, when I did this mock, I thought I had to go with this direction, but I am really, really second guessing it now that I'm looking back on it. As I'm presenting it to you here. His translation stuff, horrible. At least he shot free throws well. That's a positive. Better than RJ Barrett, better than Jarrett Colvin. So that's a positive there, but didn't score well. Hit threes, hit a lot of them. The steal rate was nice. So there are some things to work with there, but man, he just wasn't good last season at all. And you can talk about, he had to defer to these other guys. Mate, whatever team you're going to, you're deferring. Do you think he's coming in and being the number 1 option over Trae Young or even over John Collins or any other NBA caliber player who's probably better than him at this point? No, he has to try and fit in, and that's the concern, is he couldn't fit in at Duke, and how's he going to fit in on an NBA team? That's going to be the thing we need to pay attention to. At number 9, the Washington Wizards choosing Sekou Doumbouya of Limoges, I think it's pronounced, over in France, a guy who really high on at the beginning of the season, struggled a little bit this year, but started to come good. Didn't do a huge amount in terms of his overall numbers because he didn't play that many minutes, but averaged 8 points with 0.5 blocks and 0.7 steals in 20 minutes a game, around 20 minutes a game. They are some really good defensive numbers. That does help his translation stuff, and he comes in relatively solid in terms of dynasty potential with that 111 upside. I think he's got a little bit of ball handling in him as well, can shoot the ball as well. And the Wizards, with the trading of Otto Porter, they did draft Troy Brown last season and have Trevor Ariza there, but I don't think either of those, or Ariza's old obviously, I'm not sure Brown is 100% locked in as a future starter. You could also be playing Doumbia at the 4 with Punch Bob or Jabari Parker potentially no longer being on the team. So I like this pick. Obviously I made it, and I'm pretty happy with that one. The next one is one I really like, and probably in hindsight I would have made this pick at number 8. The Hawks at number 10. I better bring that graphic up for you guys watching so you can see what I'm talking about here. At number 10, the Hawks going with Brandon Clark out of Gonzaga. Now Clark, quite a bit older than a lot of these guys, or going to be turning 23 soon, but his numbers are unbelievable. 17 and 8.5 with over 3 blocks and 1.2 steals. Shot the ball well, put up the second or third best PIPM in college history over the last 10 years, second highest box score plus minus in college history as well. Just absolutely huge numbers for Clark, a guy that can play at power forward, played some center in college, probably again one of those undersized guys. Not sure he's going to do that. Yeah, and out of every player that I translated their statistics for, he came out as number 1, ahead of Zion Williamson. So that's just for pure translation, not scheme, not fit, not teammates, not anything like that, but just the college numbers. From a fantasy point of view, the free throws, the field goals, the blocks, the steals, the rebounds, the scoring, all of that. If he develops a three-point shot, I think that the top 30 in fantasy value is absolutely in play. And again, if I redid this now, I would have him a little bit higher on this on this mock draft. Instead of going at number 10 there to the Hawks, he would probably be going at 8, and I'd even consider him actually, probably looking at it again, I'd probably take him at 6 with the Phoenix Suns getting Brandon Clark there. If I was to redo this, I did this and then started reading more and just really thinking about it, and I'm really big on Clark now. Number 11, the Minnesota Timberwolves selecting Kevin Porter Jr. out of USC. We know the problems with Porter. No vision really. Really a ball stopper type of a guy who was suspended for the second half of the season for off-court issues. But his ability to create his own shot, to have the step back, to have the dribble moves, to have that just offensive excitement is really key. Now, he shot 50% on free throws, which is obviously... it's just not something that should be able to continue. He needs to be a better shooter than that, no doubt about that. His advanced numbers were pretty horrible. 56 true shooting on 23% usage is not good. A minuscule box plus minus, a negative PIPM 0.02. The numbers are really high. This is another one of those ones where it's a little bit upsidey, and perhaps I would go in a different direction here instead of Porter here at 11 for the Wolves, but just getting another dynamic sort of guard wing sort of a player, and maybe to take some pressure off an Andrew Wiggins, or if they look to move on from Andrew Wiggins, Porter could ease in a backup role. They don't have much in terms of backup guards on this squad. I think that's sort of the rationale that I had for Kevin Porter going in this slot. And then at number 12, my man Goga Bitadze.
Problem with my Gogo-mobile. Gogo-mobile? No, not the dart. Not the dart.
The dart. Goga Bitadze coming across from Mega BMAX over in the Serbian League. A guy who I absolutely love his fantasy translations, but I love his on-court stuff. When we spoke with Cole Zwicker earlier in the week, Cole was like, I think this guy is a starting caliber player. A guy that can come in a couple of years and really be an impactful guy. Good field goals, good free throws, blocks a lot of shots, rebounds, scores, hits threes. Defense is a problem, but he's also one of those centers where I believe if he plays 25 minutes a night, he can be a top 70 fantasy guy at his peak, top 50 maybe. I really do believe in Bitadze as a long-term starting center in the NBA. The Hornets are running with Cody Zeller and Bill Hernan-Gomez and Bismack Biyombo there, and I think Bitadze in a year or two's time could easily be jumping into that role and providing very strong fantasy numbers, and he'd be a guy to watch as we move forward. But I like that fit for him there at pick number 12. Don't forget to check out our sponsors, Hotels.com. Don't hate like your friend's trip. Book your own with Hotels.com and get rewarded basically everywhere. And Grip 6 belts, a great present for Father's Day. You can also buy them for women and for children as well. No holes, no flap, a great Father's Day gift. Go to grip6.com, that's grip and the number 6.com/lock, LOCKE for your special offer. All right, let's go to the next bunch of picks here in this mock draft. At pick number 13, another one that I'm really not liking, especially after reading Stefan's tweet. Nasir Little to the Miami Heat at number 13, just getting wings. Wings are always important players to get, but Little was really poor for the Tar Heels this season. 55% true shooting, a pretty poor box score plus minus. Played off the bench, I think only 18 minutes per game for Nasir Little. 10 points with 4.5 rebounds. The steal and block rates, they're not too bad. They're not disastrous. The shooting numbers are okay. So there's a little bit to work with here. A decent enough rebound rate. I think we've got a little bit to work with there. So I don't hate it as much as what I hate the Cam Reddish pick when I made that. But it's still not an ideal scenario, but these guys in this range, everyone is so close to each other. The guys I'd probably look to have ahead of him here, I'd probably go with Jackson Hayes ahead of him. I'd probably take Grant Williams ahead of him as well if I was redoing this draft. But taking a little bit of upside for the Heat there, play behind Joshie Richardson and Justice Winslow, Goran Dragic, the iron shoulder. He's just picked up his player option for this season, so he's going to be back for one more year. So I'm going with Nasir Little for the Miami Heat there at number 13. And then at number 14, rounding out the draft lottery, the Boston Celtics with the Sacramento Kings pick take Jackson Hayes out of Texas. A big man. Yes, they did draft the Rock DJ Robbie Williams last season as a center, but who knows if he's going to work out. At this point, you probably have to assume that he won't, but there's a chance. He blocks shots. He field goal percentage is high. His free throw percentage is strong. He can't rebound. That's a bit of a problem there for him as well. And the offense has got a long way to go. Not a guy that shoots threes at all, but some significant fantasy upside. We're talking 3-4 years down the track, but I also like this spot here for him at number 14. I don't believe that's too high in any stretch. You might see him in the top 6 or top 7 in drafts, but that block rate, that steal rate, all really strong, as well as the efficiency for Jackson Hayes makes him a pretty strong pick. And maybe this is going a little bit low for Hazy here in this mock draft because I don't know, just with some other selections there which I'm not too keen on when thinking back on it. Plus an 8.27 PIPM, one of the highest in this class as well. So some strong defensive numbers for him. And then at number 15, the Detroit Pistons selecting Nichol Alexander Walker. Virginia Tech guard, sophomore, guy that I thought maybe should have come out last season, but he has elevated his stock quite a bit. So in the end, it was the right decision. Averaged 16 and 4 with 4 rebounds and almost 2 steals. The shooting for him is pretty solid, and that's a positive. Plus 7.3 PIPM. Good number there as well. Offensively, defensively, we need the shooting to be able to translate. Still a bit of a question mark for Alexander Walker. I'm not sold on it not happening. I'm also not fully convinced that it is definitely going to happen. He's got good size though, and that steal rate is impressive, and we need for that to come true. And he can have some fantasy value because of that steal rate, and if the threes start coming in, he can be like a specialist type of guy. Not someone I expect to have too much of an impact though in his first season in the NBA. Let's go on to the next group of guys, rounding out the top 20 at number 16. The Magic take Romeo Langford. I didn't want to take a front court guy for them. Maybe I should have, because I don't know what I feel about Langford. I'm not super confident in him as well. The wrist injury limited his shooting under 30% from 3, 2 assists per game. He's a 6'6 wing who has a pretty decent block rate. Steal rate is below par. Can finish at the rim. That's strong, and that's something that is helpful for this Orlando Magic team. Defensively, I think he has some worries. The length is okay, and no ability to shoot or really create for others is a concern for Langford. And I think one of the worst translated fantasy guys coming out of college with poor percentages, steals, blocks, low assist rate, low threes, low score, just low everything. Really, really poor numbers. They really remind me in terms of fantasy impact per minute of how Jaylen Brown came out of Cal. Now, Jaylen Brown's a better player, but in terms of fantasy, Brown's ability is not high. He is not a good fantasy player, and that's sort of how they're not at all the same player. That's not what I'm saying in the slightest, but the way that they translate across is very interesting, and that's sort of how I have Langford. It's just not a good fantasy player, really at all. But you went with that pick there at 16 for the Magic. At number 17, the Atlanta Hawks back on the board, and here is Grant Williams. Love this pick for the Hawks. They got 2 of the guys that I'm really interested in, Brandon Clark and Grant Williams. Some really strong translation numbers for Williams. Could be a modern 4. I mentioned a Paul Millsap type comparison with Cole the other day. great field goal percentage, strong free throw percentage. Needs to work on his threes, no doubt about that, but he's got that ability. A little bit older, but still only 20, even though he is a junior. Averaged 19, 8, and 3 with 1.5 blocks and 1.1 steals. That's got all the makings of a great fantasy player, but he's also a smart on-court guy, just a guy that is going to come in and be able to contribute pretty much immediately on if he's in the right situation because of just how smart he is. People talk about him as being one of the highest basketball IQ players in this class coming out of Tennessee. And, all the advanced numbers really love him as well. Fourth in this class in PIPM with a plus 10.4 PIPM. Really strong numbers from Grant Williams, and I do like him going there to the Atlanta Hawks. At number 18, the Indiana Pacers. Tyler Hero of Kentucky. The Pacers are possibly going to lose a few guards coming up in free agency. Hero, a guy that can hit the three, can shoot it well. His usage and the shot quality he takes, the usage will probably go down, the shot quality will probably go up. I think he missed 6 free throws for the entire season. A bit of the benefit of the doubt to Kentucky guys. Can they do more than what they showed in college? Well, that's what we got to hope for. But even as an immediate impact Landry Shamet type of a player in his rookie season, I could see Hero coming in and hitting 1.6 threes immediately. Defensively, he does have some concerns, but this Pacers team has a really strong defense, and he should be able to fit in there. And Aaron Holiday, Tyler Hero, backcourt of the future, maybe, or Victor Oladipo's around still as well. Of course, but we don't know how he's recovering from his injury. Hero at 6'6", could he play up a little bit to the 3 in certain configurations? You wouldn't want to do it all that much, but I really like the shooting that Hero can bring, one of the best shooters in the entire draft. At number 19, the Spurs going with Rui Hachimura from Gonzaga, the center. I think Hachimura is probably going to go in the lottery in the draft. I am obviously not as high on him as some NBA GMs might be. The scoring is really nice from him, solid percentages. The lack of defense bugs me. Not a great rebounder as well, Hachimura, but a lot of scoring. But how is scoring going to translate across into the NBA? 20 points per game, 21 years of age already. I worry a little bit about how he translates. I think he might get just a little bit lost in the NBA, never translate into a full-time starter. It's a great opportunity for the Spurs to develop some of those defensive skills. The advanced numbers were really good, but it pretty much all came on offense. Can he develop a reliable three-point shot? I am a little bit worried about Rui being able to do that. Then at number 20, the Celtics going with Cam Johnson, an older player, but someone like Tyler Hero that can hit those threes. I think he can come in again. It depends on the role, depends what happens with the trade. If Brown is gone, if Marcus Smart goes in any sort of Anthony Davis deal, could Cam Johnson come in and play 18 minutes and be the guy that RJ Hunter was supposed to be a couple of years ago? Come in and bang in 1.5 threes per game and do it at 40% as a rookie, like Luke Kennard a couple of years ago. He did that too. Not much else really happening with Cam Johnson. In terms of his other numbers, he's not a bad rebounder, but he's not the greatest rebounder. Still has a bit of value, but quite limited upside, but can be a fantasy guy from the get-go, just as a streaming option for his three-point ability. That's the top 20 done in this draft. Let's move on to the next group of guys. At 21, another Kentucky player, the Oklahoma City Thunder, taking PJ Washington out of Kentucky. Another one of these undersized centers, like 6'7", 6'8" centers, who probably have to play more of the 4 in the NBA. A guy who he scores well defensively. We still have concerns. He had an injury in the tournament, so didn't finish out the season there. Subpar efficiency, subpar defensive stats from PJ as well. So there is some concern about how he can translate across to fantasy or to the NBA, actually, not just fantasy, into the NBA with that undersized, really offensive-minded center. There is a concern with how he translates across. PIPM was okay, 7.96, but not completely sold on PJ. Needs to improve his awareness as well, and needs to be able to develop that three-point shot, which I think he can. We're just not at that area at this point. At number 22, the Celtics with their third selection, Luka Samanic, coming across from Olympia, which coincidentally, well, not really coincidentally, just as what's happened, Ettore Messina has left the Spurs to become the GM and head coach of Olympia Milan. So he's coming. Samanic is coming across. Doesn't want to be stashed. Apparently, wants to come over and contribute this season. it might be in a limited role, but we saw these European guys like Vanilla Tice come over, Brad Wanamaker. They're a bit older, of course, but they came in and could be rotation guys and contribute to this Celtics squad pretty much straight away. Samanic, 6'11", much stronger now than what he was, can take a little bit off the dribble. The shooting is still not there, but there is some ability for that to improve. I think he's got some significant upside as well at this spot. Defensively is going to be the concern, and getting that efficiency up probably takes a couple of years, but a strong rebounder, working on his strength, and probably better with the ball in his hands than we may have imagined initially. At number 23, the Utah Jazz select Khaldun Johnson out of Kentucky. A few Kentucky guys going off the board at the moment. Khaldun, a 3-and-D wing. The Jazz could be losing Tabo Cephalosha. They could be losing Kyle Korver. Johnson, not a guy whose stats are going to wow you at all. In fact, they're going to do whatever the opposite of wowing you is. I translated 109 guys coming out of college, and he was the 103rd in terms of fantasy value. The only guys behind him, none of them are first-round type players. There's Charles Matthews, who just tore his ACL, Simisola Shitu, Tadas Setakursis, Quentin Grimes, Tyus Battle, and Ochai Agbaji. They're the only guys who translated worse, with poor rebounds, poor shooting, poor free throws, no steal, no block numbers. Really, really poor stuff from Khaldun Johnson there. For a 3-and-D wing, he needs to work on his 3 and he needs to work on his D. So there is...
Problem.
Push the wrong button.
Giggity.
That's the one that I wanted. So there is some concern there, but I think the Jazz, good player development, not going to be forced into a large role, but obviously not someone that we're massively keen on for fantasy value. The next bunch of guys at 24, the Philadelphia 76ers going with Matisse Thybulle out of Washington. Just absolutely love the defensive ability for Thybulle. Steal rate out the absolute arse. Block rate was massive. He can hit a 3. The percentages are weird. He's had good free throw seasons, bad free throw seasons, solid 3-point shooting until his senior season. But on a Sixers team that needs wings, he could be straight into the mix there, provide some defense. And if that catch and shoot 3 playing off Embiid or Butler or Harris or Simmons, whoever, if he can just sit there, take those threes, be a really, really low usage guy while also generating a shit ton of steals, that's useful for fantasy. Think Tony Allen, but with probably a better shot. And if he's not going to probably get the 29 minutes that Tony Allen was getting, but in 22 minutes you get 1.2 steals, Corey Brewer-esque. That's absolutely streamable. But I absolutely just love the fit on the court for the Sixers. A wing to come in there and play behind Harris and Covington, and when Covington goes off the court, giving you another defensive guy to come in. Now, some of his defense to do with the zone scheme Washington played, how much is that going to hold up? I still think he's a pretty good defender, and I think that fits well there. The Portland Trailblazers at number 25, KZ Okpala out of Stanford, another wing-type player for the Blazers, who could be losing the Chief Al-Farouq Aminu.
Sometimes it may be good, sometimes it may be shit.
Mo Harkless push up to the 4. Could KZ play at the 4 as well? His stats aren't, they're not great in terms of his translations. Again, low efficiency, low steal and block rates, doesn't pass well. Shooting's not great. It's not terrible, but it's not great. He just provides solid enough performance on the wing. Really strong wingspan as well. Big length, 6'10", small forward who can play up at the 4 as well. Needs to do more defensively, needs to be a little bit more aware on both ends of the court, but shot 37% of his threes as a sophomore. So there is something to build on there with him. And in terms of the fit, I could easily see him ending up being a better player than PJ Washington, than Samanic, than Khaldun Johnson, jumping ahead of all those guys where I picked him. At number 26, the Cleveland Cavaliers taking Nick Claxton out of Georgia, the big man. Really low field goal percentage for a big man for Claxton. He is rising up draft boards at the moment. I think he'll probably go higher than this. I like his ability to protect the rim, 2.5 blocks with 9 boards and 13 points last season. That efficiency really has to rise though. But he is a strong option for a team that's only got Tristan Thompson and Ante Zizic there in that center position. Claxton wouldn't have to contribute immediately, but there's a huge path for him to move forward. Give him a little bit of time to develop. Strong defensive presence, and I could see him being a starter in a couple of years' time. Could work into a top 100 fantasy role in the years to come, but more about on-court fit with this Cavs team, or even just taking best player available. I think Claxton probably is that guy at this spot. The guy that I had at pick number 27 probably would have been best player available had he not suffered an ACL injury at the end of the season, and that is Chuma Okeke. The Brooklyn Nets taking that pick there at number 27 with Okeke out of Auburn. He might not play at all this season, but a guy, again, really strong, 6'8", small forward, power forward type of a player. Almost 2 steals and 1.2 blocks a game, 12.7 rebounds. A lot to like about Okeke. We just had that ACL injury. Now, it is only one ACL injury. ACLs are not the same thing as they were in the past. I think, and again, looking back on this, I think this is probably a little bit too late for Okeke, a guy who translates amazingly well for fantasy, really good stat numbers for him as well. It's just that you're not going to have to, you're not going to really have his services for the majority of this season, and then even when he returns, he's not going to be up to full speed as a rookie. But I really, really think that this is a guy that teams pass on him too much, and I think I've probably passed on him too much here as well. They will end up regretting that. At number 28, the Golden State Warriors taking Talen Horton-Tucker out of Iowa State. Garpacks are furious they couldn't get their Iowa State guy. Decent enough steal rate for him, but the shooting really, 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 really a problem. I'll get his numbers up in a second. The shooting was not good for Horton-Tucker. The assist rate was pretty low as well. It's the steals that are nice. He's long. He's 6'4" with a big wingspan, so it's getting those defensive numbers similar to, I guess, Jacob Evans, what they wanted him to do. Horton-Tucker, more of a 2-3 than a 1-2 type of a player. Not going to have really any sort of impact on this Golden State Warriors team, even if Kevin Durant doesn't return, or weirdly if Klay Thompson doesn't return, which it seems like almost an impossibility. At number 29, the San Antonio Spurs taking Mufiondu Kabengele out of Florida State, a big man, getting some depth in that front court. For the Spurs, I think is important. Now, I like Kabengele. I like his block ability. Solid enough free throw shooter. Good rebounder. Can hit the threes. Can score a bit. This could end up being a really a long-term win for fantasy leagues, but also for the Spurs. Big length, 7'3" wingspan. He's strong. He hit his threes pretty well. 37% of his threes last season. Cannot pass at all. That's a concern. Had the knee problems. Wore braces on both knees, but apparently the medicals checked out at the combine and his knees are fine. So that's good. Maybe that pushes him up a little bit further up the board come draft day. But Kabengele going to the Spurs there at number 29. Let's round out the first round now with number 30, the Bucks selecting Carson Edwards out of Purdue. Small guard, but strong, stocky, can score quite a bit. Here, could he fill in that George Hill role from last season? Maybe. Defensively, there's going to be some concerns just with his height that is just always hard to overcome as a 6-foot player. Whether you can come in and do that, it is a real concern. But his scoring stuff was obviously impressive. He had some hot moments in the tournament, but still overall his field goal percentage was atrocious. And I think we get a little bit pushed forward, or we get a little bit swayed by what happened with Edwards and that shooting through the NCAA tournament versus what he did earlier in the season. But some of that is just taking on such a large load. Giggity! As well, that it might be tough. His steal rate's not too bad. Not really a creator for others, but a shot creator for himself, which is good enough, and a good free throw shooter as well. So he rounds out the first round. Let's go through the second round. I'm not going to talk anywhere near as much on these second round guys. At number 31, the Brooklyn Nets, Dylan Windler, a guy who translates unbelievably well coming out of Belmont. A guy who's a strong rebounder, hits the three well, steal rate okay, super efficient. Love this pick for the Nets. Windler, real chance to go in the first round. I couldn't sneak him in doing this draft, but I'm really big on what he can do. Now, he is older, going to turn 23 in a few months' time, but averaged 21 and 11 with 1.4 steals and shot like 45% from three in college. Yeah, the quality of opponents probably wasn't as good for him as what it was for others, but I still really like that selection. At number 32, Ty Jerome of the Virginia Cavaliers going to the Phoenix Suns. A long guard, 6'6", decent enough assist rate, which not many of the guards in this draft actually have. Good steal rate as well for Jerome, someone who is going to have an opportunity there with guys like Ali Okobo, DeAnthony Melton, depending on what they do in free agency, Tyler Johnson as well. He's going to have an opportunity to at least push these players, but the assist rate, the steal rate, and the okay free throw shooting with some ability to improve, and the solid enough three-point volume, it makes him an intriguing prospect for me at that 32 pick. Let's go on to the next group of guys. The Sixers have back-to-back picks. At 33, I'm going with Bruno Fernando out of Maryland, a backup center. Big, strong man that can take some of those minutes away from the process. Joel Embiid, of course, Amir Johnson, Boban Marjanovic, Jonah Bolden, they were trying to hold it down last season to varying levels of success. I think Bolden can really step up into that role, but if Fernando can develop, and he's got a lot of work to do defensively, but he can develop, he can be a guy that can come in a couple of years' time and spell Embiid. They also take Admiral Schofield out of Tennessee, who is a guy obviously really strong in that Marcus Smart type of body, not the creator, not the point guard that Smart is, strong enough defender, just another big, strong wing body who comes in relatively ready to be a rotation guy if necessary for this Sixers squad, and that's why I'm going with Schofield there. And then at 35, the Atlanta Hawks taking Bol out of Oregon. Now, Bol could go in the top 12, realistically. The foot injury for a 7'3" man is a concern. I worry about his complete lack of strength and high center of gravity. He is an unbelievably good shooter, and he's a great rim protector. They are fantastic skills. He just offers absolutely nothing else. You pair that with the lack of desire, and does he actually like playing basketball? Does he work hard enough? Plus the broken foot for a man that's 7'3", they are the concerns, but you have to take a flyer on him, I think, at this point, especially for a Hawks team with so many picks. Let's see what happens with Bol. Let's see how his foot is. Let's see if he gives a shit at all and whether he can develop that three-point shooting, shot blocking combination, which could really, if everything panned out, if he played 28 minutes a night, he'd be a top 60 fantasy guy in a couple of years' time. So I think you've got to take that flyer on Bol there at number 35. The last Nichol, the next five guys here in this top 40. At number 36, the Hornets taking Darius Bazley, a guy that was going to go to the G League and then end up signing an internship with New Balance. 6'9", 6'10" forward who's showing some intrigue as a shooter. I think Bazley's a great second round pick as a flyer. We don't really know huge amounts about him because we didn't see him play in college, but as a fluid athlete as a forward, getting forwards, always a tough thing. He can fill in that role that, say, Trevion Graham and Dwayne Bacon have filled over the last couple of seasons for the Hornets. Really strong, 8'11" standing reach. The finishing is good for him. The three-point shooting is there. We just don't know if those shots are going to go in, how they're going to go in competition. But guys that didn't play last season, Mitchell Robinson, excellent rookie season. Anthony Simons, another guy who didn't play for Portland, but when he was on the court, he didn't look out of place. I'm not saying that Bazley is the same guys as those, but really strong body size and body shape. I think we've got to take that pick here. At number 37.
Bort? Oh, come on, Bort?
Mommy, buy me a license plate.
No, come along, Bort.
Are you talking to me?
No, my son is also named Bort.
The Mavericks go with Luguentz Dort out of is it the best name? Is Admiral Schofield the best name, or is Luguentz Dort the best name? I'm going to go with Dort. It's a terrible name, but yeah, he's a player who played for Arizona State last season. Just a wing guard type of a guy. We do have to worry about his shot. Some real concerns as to how that's going to translate across. But strong man, strong body as a player. Taking this selection of a guy who was a freshman, coming in 222 pounds, decent enough wingspan. It's just hitting that three. Can he do that in a backup role behind, say, Tim Hardaway while waiting for JJ Barea to return? I think taking that flyer on him at this spot is the right spot. At 38, the Bulls go with Daniel Gafford out of Arkansas, a center there. Robin Lopez potentially on the move. So Gafford could come in and get some of those minutes behind both Wendell Carter and Lauri Markkanen as that third string center. His stock was probably a little bit higher last season, Gafford, but he decided to go back to school. Still averaged 17 and 9 with 2 blocks and a steal. And if that comes to fruition in the NBA, there's a good fantasy player there. Good field goal percentage. The free throws are a real worry. But could he at some point develop into a DeAndre Jordan impact sort of a player? Not that he's the same guy, but there's a similar-ish type of profile there for Gafford, so he's a name to watch, no doubt. At number 39, Eric Pascal goes to the New Orleans Pelicans. Pascal out of Villanova. Horrible fantasy translations coming across, but a guy that I keep seeing people talk about, he's being underrated. I'm not massively into Pascal. I think that this is probably the right spot. I've seen people looking at him as a first-round guy. I'm not so keen there, but guys, smart players coming out of Villanova always demand your attention. Defensively, there could be some concerns with him. His offensive stuff is not horrible, but the real lack of defensive stats and concern in that end is a problem. And then at number 40, the Kings going with Isaiah Roby out of Nebraska. A wing player, 6'8.5", didn't really wow us, but the defensive stats are exciting. Almost 2 blocks and 1.3 steals for Roby. Just a low usage guy with low efficiency. That sort of holds him back, but that defensive upside, steals and blocks, is intriguing, and it is definitely someone to get us on the radar, and just getting that guy in to play the wing when the Kings do have, he's probably more of a 4, but they do have a hole there at the wing. Just getting a guy in to develop. He couldn't be worse than Justin Jackson. All right, and let's go on to the next bunch of these picks. At 41, Jonte Porter goes to the Atlanta Hawks. Tore his ACL twice in a row, hasn't played basketball in over a year, but he would have been a top 10 pick in this draft. I think, again, like they took Bol, you have to take a flyer on a guy who can shoot, who can pass, who's 6'11". Defensively, he's got some concerns, but I really like Jonte Porter's skill set. And if 1 ACL's fine, 2 is a real worry. But if he comes back fine and he doesn't rush himself, which is what he did when he tore his 2nd ACL, that really, really could work out well for them. And again, a superb fantasy translation for Jonte Porter. At number 76, Jesus. At number 42, the Philadelphia 76ers choose Zach Norval Jr. Again, just always looking to get wings in this portion of the draft. A guy whose shooting is a concern, but threes at a high volume, free throw percentage was pretty strong. 3 assists per game as a 6'5" shooting guard is a decent enough number. Coming out of Gonzaga, he's turning 22 in about 6 months' time, so that's a little bit of a concern. But again, the Sixers really into that win now-ish sort of mode, just loading up on wings. They're going to have DRC, Zaire Smith from last season, Thibault here in this draft, Admiral Schofield here in this draft as well, and now Zach Norval Jr. At 43, the Minnesota Timberwolves taking Shamori Pons, a very much a score-first point guard out of St. John's. You always need guards. Derrick Rose might not be back. Tyus Jones might not be back. So another guy to come in there and at least provide some usage as a scorer. Whether he can fill that role, because we know how Derrick Rose loved his usage. Defensively is a real concern for Pons, but a guy I think that is worth that pick. In this selection, averaged 20 and 5 last season with 2.6 steals. They are obviously really exciting numbers. It's going to be hard for him to ever be a 30-minute-a-night guy, but if he was, he does have really significant fantasy upside. Next up at 44, the Atlanta Hawks, Davidas Servaitis out of Lithuania, I believe, is where Servaitis is coming from. I could be wrong on that, so I apologise if that. No, Lithuania is correct. A 6'8" wing player. Didn't really blow anyone away with his numbers. In fact, they're quite poor. What his production was over in Lithuania last season. But just getting another wing player to come in. He played for Lietuvos Raitas last season. He is he's 19 years of age, just turned 19 a couple of days ago. In fact, the lack of defensive numbers is a worry. More assists than turnovers, so that's a little bit of a positive for him coming across, but not the greatest of prospects. But that's what you're expecting at this point in the draft, as the Hawks take Servaitis. At 45, the Pistons taking Jalen Lecque, a guy who did not go to college, went to Brewster Academy, very much in the Anthony Simons type of role, super explosive guard who, again, just getting some excitement, some athleticism, hopefully some scoring and shooting for Lecque onto this Pistons team. I really, those guys who didn't go to college, the Robinsons and Simons, maybe I'm being a little bit skewed by how solid and competent they looked in the NBA, but taking Lecque here works out for me. At 46, the Orlando Magic going with Terrence Davis out of Ole Miss, a scoring guard who's risen up quite a bit recently over the last couple of weeks or months in the draft. Just getting a guy to come in and be able to score, I think, is key for this Magic team. A defensive type player behind Evan Fournier. Give him some time to develop. Maybe the other Terrence Ross leaves, and that gives Davis an ability to come in and take over some role in the next couple of seasons at least. The next bunch of guys up here at 47, the Kings going with this big man from LSU, Naz Reid. I don't really have much to say about Naz. He's He's a player, sure. Low defensive numbers, solid enough rebounding, poor efficiency, just like so many. That is just like a blanket statement for this class. Low defensive stats and poor efficiency. And that's exactly what Reed is, a black hole offensively as well. Probably a guy that doesn't really stick in the NBA past a couple of years. But there's going to be so many of these guys at the end of the draft that are like that. Same as the next guy, number 48, the Clippers taking Louis King out of Oregon. I don't really have a strong feel on him being a long-term prospect in the NBA. 3-point shooting, not bad for King, at least volume-wise. He can do something there. 13.5 points as a freshman, a bit of an older freshman. He's 6'8" as a wing, but again, getting wings in and seeing if they can work out is a good idea. And the Spurs at 49 taking Jalen Mcdaniels. Off-court issues were a concern with Mcdaniels coming out of San Diego State. But a guy who has an ability to shoot a little bit, needs work on that area, but Spurs needing those sort of wing players like so many other teams. There's enough upside here with McDaniels who flashes enough to get us a little bit excited and then can let us down in other areas. At number 50, Jalen Noel goes to, is it Noel or Noel? I don't know. Jalen Noel for the Pacers there at number 50. At number 51, the Celtics taking Yovel Zuzman from Israel. And then at 52, the Hornets, Ignas Brazdeikis out of Michigan. I'm just going to run through these last couple of picks. At 53, the Jazz taking Daquan Jeffries. Now, this is probably one I'd do a little bit higher for Jeffries now, redoing it. I've had a little bit more time to think about him, but I think it's a strong pick. At 54, the Sixers taking Didi, the Brazilian, who will likely stay overseas, but Brazilian player who's shown a little bit, remained in the draft, didn't pull himself out. At 55, the Knicks taking Jordan Poole. At 56, the Clippers, Brian Bowen out of Sydney in the NBL. The Pelicans at 57 going with Quindary Weatherspoon. At 58, the Warriors taking Zylan Cheatham. Actually, I talked about best names. I've got a couple of other options here. Shamori Pons is a strong name. Yuval Zuzman is a strong name. DD is a good name. Quindary Weatherspoon and Zylan Cheatham, just some fantastic names. 59, Jordan Bone to the Raptors, and then at 60, Taco Fall to the Kings, the 7'28" center out of UCF, with the last pick in this mock draft for the 2019 NBA draft. That'll wrap it up for me today. I've talked way too much about these prospects. We're going to do more draft stuff next week, and then the NBA draft's only a week away. Subscribe to this podcast on Himalaya, on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, and on Spotify, and give it a 5-star rating. That would be excellent. And on YouTube, hit subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, leave a comment, give it a thumbs up, share it with all your friends as well. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Luka Samanic.